Hello, John. How you doing?
Doing good, Tyler. How are you today?
I'm doing just great. Just great. I'm not going to tell anybody how far we got last episode before I realized that I did not hit the record button. So
Yeah.
people say that recording live is tough. Well, trying to record when I'm not live, I have no one to tell me that that I'm screwing it up.
It's a tight ship we run here. This is
I almost lost my job.
yeah, this is high quality entertainment. So
Yeah. The good thing about not hitting record is that no one else has to deal with it except for you and I
yeah, you and I and me.
and me.
So yeah. Hold on one second.
Cool. Yep. Once that we just start and you already have things to do that are more important.
Yes. All right, I'm ready now.
All right. Might as well just hit and record again because we're not live here.
It's endearing.
Okay.
Our listeners live for this kind of stuff. It humanizes us.
We are
Makes
very
us less
human.
intimidating. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
Great.
I did want to start off a little bit talking. So I mentioned last time at the end of the last episode how much I hate asking for donations and all that. But I was also torn because as much as I hate asking for donations, I really do think that the time and effort you put into this is worth letting listeners know. Hey, this is a PhD level person who taught history at Arizona State University. We're getting some great content here, and I wanted to give them the opportunity to reach out to you. And there was one thing specifically I wanted to talk about with regards to that. And if any of y'all have a favorite podcast that talks about church history, I would venture to say that it's part of a larger organization that has an agenda, and whether that agenda is pro pro um, pro church, anti church, whatever it is, nearly every podcast I've come across that I've been able to really dig deep into that has decent quality, at least, is being financed by somebody with deep pockets. And I want our listeners to understand that that is not us. I think it's very clear that's not us, but that is not us. This is literally two guys, one really smart, one not so much, and microphone, a streaming. We got this streaming thing. We're paying for a website, but really that's about all we are. And there's no strings attached, no agenda. It's just John being as honest, as open as he can with just the information he has as he sees it. And I think most importantly, there's nobody censoring, nobody editing, nobody saying, well, let's not talk about this topic or let's not ask those questions. We are just an open book. And I think that's very valuable in this space for um, just to kind of tell the story the way John sees it without trying to push anybody one way or another. So if you value that, this is my NPR type. If you value that, if you have a little bit of means to support John in this, please go to withthestonerolling.org and express your appreciation.
And if you would like to match any donations that come in, you could do that too. But no, I'm just joking there. But
That would be
yeah,
that'd be very easy. How about this? I'll match all of our donations up to this point. No.
Yeah, zero.
No,
What's zero times
yeah.
zero?
I'm all for the national public radio scene of, hey, you get us a target, a goal, and we'll throw it out there. And if
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, the fact is, Tyler's absolutely right. We are not paid enough to pull any punches. So yeah, we'll come for all of it. we'll talk about any of it. Um, and yeah, we call it like we see it. So that's that's the historian's way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I'd be knowing you well enough. I think even if we did have a sponsor of some sort, you still wouldn't change anything you talked about. But
that's right.
it's nice.
That's right.
It's nice for people. It's nice for people to understand that that doesn't exist regardless. So
Yeah, that's right. I can't be bought. I'm not gonna sell myself out.
how much did the Dodgers pay to wear that hat tonight?
Oh, that's why I tipped it up, Tyler.
Oh,
But you gave it
I'm
away.
sorry. Are you sponsored by the
uh,
Los Angeles Dodgers?
the Dodgers have a very, very strong interest in magic in the New England area in the early 1800s. That's all I'll say about that.
Oh, excellent. Well,
Their owner
cool.
is Magic Johnson. Just Magic and
Is he really?
yeah, he's
Awesome.
one of the owners. Yeah,
He was the owner of the person who ran the cafeteria at my work office building a couple years back as well.
he was the owner of the person that
No,
ran the
well, no, not the owner of the
cafeteria.
person. The owner of the cafeteria company, whatever the company is.
Oh,
So
oh, I didn't know that. He's
yeah,
into catering, huh?
he's into
Or
office
cafeteria
cafeteria, like office cafeteria, rest, food, food preparation
services
services.
providers.
Yeah,
Oh,
cool.
okay. Good for
So I think
Magic.
last time we wrapped up, we were talking about Mr. Knight, I believe. Where were we on that, John?
Yes. Yeah. So, as our listeners know, as our faithful listeners know, I should say, unlike the fake ones out there, our faithful listeners know that we like to focus on specific sources for each episode. We try to do that anyway. Sometimes they get skipped, but so for this episode, we are focusing on the recollections of Joseph Knight Sr. And Joseph Knight Sr. is a very important figure in early church history. The reason why he's important is because he was a big time provider for Joseph Smith. He gave him a lot of financial backing, some safety, and a little bit of credibility. Everyone talks about Martin Harris. Martin Harris is, and rightfully so. He mortgaged his farm to pay for the publication of the Book of Mormon. Uh, gave Joseph money to live on while he was translating, that kind of stuff. But Joseph Knight
Was he
Sr.
also the
also,
co-president?
what's that?
Was Martin Harris the co-president as well
Of the church?
of the church?
No,
Oh, okay, never mind.
no. I don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he never held that office, but he was one of the three witnesses. So, but yeah, Joseph Knight Sr. was one of the producers, I guess, or one of the providers for Joseph Smith. And sometime between 1833 and 1847, he wrote down some recollections of time when Joseph obtained the golden plates. So, and these recollections are very interesting. They're very helpful for giving us an idea of what was going on at that time. They match up well with Lucy Mack Smith's recollections. Obviously, there's some discrepancy between the two, but that's normal considering whenever two people tell the same story, there's always going to be discrepancies. There's nothing unusual about that.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
I think I brought up my favorite saying that anytime you have one clock, you know what time it is. But the moment you get a second clock, you don't know which one's right. And the more clocks you have, they're all going to be a little different, and you have less of an idea of what time it is with the more information you have. Similar to getting all these different sources in. The more sources you have more information. It's good, but you have a lot more to decipher and figure out what's real and what's not.
mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. So, so that's why the Joseph Knight Sr. record is fairly important. And just like any other historic source, we do have to take into account some of the potential issues with it. So, as I said, this was written sometime between 1833 and 1847, which is kind of problematic. Uh, that's a window of time that could be anywhere from 6 to 7 years after Joseph got the plates to 20 years after Joseph got the plates. And, memory is a tricky thing. So there could be some discrepancy there. Another issue is that, uh, as I've already stated, Knight was a very big supporter of Joseph. So there could be some biases there, which is a two-edged sword because that also eliminates any of the anti-Mormon sentiment that was, or anti-Joseph Smith sentiment, I should say, that was very prevalent at the time. So we kind of get the best or worst of both worlds, depending on how you look at it.
Cool. And you mentioned that just Joseph Knight, he was faithful all through his life. So it's not like some sources where they were very involved, and then later on, after they left the church, they wrote some things. He was faithful throughout his life, and these documents were found in the church archives, which one might put a little more credibility toward something that's
Correct.
been in the church's possession the entire time.
Correct. Yeah. So that brings up two important things. So Joseph Knight Sr. did stay faithful to the church. As far as I know, I don't think he ever left. He may be one of those ones who left for a minute but then came back. But he ended up he died on the overland trail to Utah in 1847. So he was following Brigham Young to Utah, which gives you some idea that he was faithful to Joseph and then the 12 apostles, and not the Smith family necessarily in Nauvoo, because we know that after Joseph died, there was a schism in the church. The biggest ones were between Brigham Young and the Smith family. So Knight obviously elected to go with Brigham Young, and he passed away while traveling to Utah. The other thing that you bring up, the important thing, is that this recollection was found in the church history archives, and it was sort of put back together by a historian named Dean Jesse. And we are missing bits of it, but Dean was able to put it all together and make a coherent narrative out of it. That happened around, I believe, 1977. So this recollection has been around for a while.
Cool.
Okay, so let's jump into it. When we ended last time, I believe we were just talking about how Joseph was about to pick up the plates, and he had been told, this is according to Knight, that Joseph had been told by the angel Moroni that he was to bring the right person the following year with him to get the plates. So Joseph was not able to get the plates the first time he found them. The angel said, "You can have them next year if you bring the right person." Joseph asks the angel, "Well, who is the right person?" And the angel says, "Your brother Alvin." Now, the only problem with that is that Alvin died 2 months after Joseph first found the plates. So that was impossible. So he comes back the next year or 2 years after. At this point, it gets a little hazy. But according to Joseph Knight, again, the angel told him, "You can't have the plates this year. You have to come back next year with the right person." And Joseph doesn't ask the angel who the right person is. Instead, he looks into his seer stone and he sees Emma, who he had met. He was probably in love with, but was not married to yet.
John, going back to the first person that he was supposed to bring, I recall hearing that, and I think the person who sent the questions in last time asked the same question, that Alvin might have been dug up by Joseph Smith Sr. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what we know and what we might not know about them digging up Alvin's body after this? Knowing that he was the person that Joseph Smith was supposed to bring to get the plates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a little bit about Alvin. I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode. We probably did, but Alvin was kind of the co-head of the family at this point. At the when Joseph was first when he first discovered the plates, Alvin was kind of the co-head of the family, and he passed away. Most historians credit his passing to malpractice from some doctors who gave him mercury to help cure an infection. So he passed away, and at some point there was uh, rumors started going around, or at least people found out that Alvin was supposed to go with Joseph to get the plates. And around the time that Joseph started, the time was getting closer for him to get the plates, at some point this rumor started spreading that Alvin had been, um, what's the word? Basically dug up. There's a more respectable word for it, but
Is it exhumed or
exhumed. Yeah, there you go. Good job, Tyler. Exhumed and taken to perform some, disturbing ritual to get the plates. That was sort of the rumor going around. And so Joseph Smith Sr., in an effort to put those rumors to rest, actually did have Alvin exhumed, and they did an autopsy, and he published in one of the local papers that, just as a proof that that Alvin had not been exhumed, that his body had not been tampered with. I think for two reasons he did that. The first was to clear his own family's name. The second was to make sure that no one had done it, that no one had actually gone and exhumed Alvin just to make the family look bad. You know what I mean?
Were these stories a ways after Joseph was supposed to go back with Alvin then? Because when I think of exhuming a body that's
Mm-hmm.
buried, or digging any hole for that matter, if I go and look at where a hole was dug a week ago, I think it'd be pretty clear that the land was disturbed. So this must have been sometime after the accusations were made, right?
Right, right. Yeah. So I mean, it was pretty clear that the body had not been taken up. I'm not sure exactly on the timeline. I want to say that Joseph Smith Sr. published the article about Alvin sometime around 1827, maybe a little bit earlier. I'll have to check that, but uh, yeah. So it was pretty clear that nobody had touched Alvin's body, and I can't remember if we talked about this in the last episode, but you hear about this story and your heart kind of goes out to the Smith family. First of all, their oldest son, their main breadwinner, passes away. That's traumatic. But then to have these rumors going around that his body had been exhumed and that they had performed some kind of disturbing ritual to get the plates, um, that it's kind of like a double whammy. So um, it's a pretty disturbing. At least I would have felt, if it were me, I would have felt pretty disturbed hearing those kinds of rumors, and then having to put those rumors to rest by digging my son up and publishing about it in the local paper.
Right. I couldn't
And
imagine that'd be easy.
yeah, but that is a good question. I'll see if I can dig up the actual article that Joseph Smith Sr. published, because I think that'd be interesting.
If you do, throw it on Instagram.
Yeah, okay, good idea.
That's a
But
yeah.
that's a good plug. We do have an Instagram, with a stone rolling. We post on it every once in a while. Check it out. Give us a follow or a like or whatever the hip kids are doing these days. We'd appreciate it. So, um, where was I? Okay, so Joseph had looked into his stone and seen Emma. This is again according to Joseph Knight. So a little bit about Emma. Uh, they were married in January 18th, on January 18th, 1827. Joseph had met her while he was working for Josiah Stoll, looking for that alleged silver mine. Joseph and his father had been living with the Hales, Emma's family, while they were working for Stoll. And Isaac Hale, Emma's father, did not really have a very high opinion of Joseph, kind of considered him a ne'er do well, because he was always out looking for treasure or whatever. And
So Isaac wouldn't have
yeah.
been part of this process. I mean, Joseph went down there for a job. Isaac wasn't
Mhm.
involved in that as a customer or a worker or anything like that.
Nope. Nope. My guess is he was kind of a reluctant associate. I imagine that Stoll was paying for the Smiths to be boarded there, and Isaac, being uh, a good businessman, decides, sure, yeah, I'll take your money to put these guys up. But that doesn't mean he agreed with what they were doing. He was not a treasure seeker, or didn't buy into any of that kind of stuff. And so when Emma and Joseph did get married, uh, Emma and Joseph returned to pick up some of Emma's things, and Isaac kind of berated Joseph, tore him a new one, and Joseph told Isaac that he really was not going to continue treasure seeking, that he wanted to work hard and provide for his daughter. And so Isaac kind of took him for his word and helped him get started in business, or wanted to, at least. He sold him some property, and they started living in harmony. And yeah.
And so you mentioned this. I'm putting the timelines together back in my head.
Mhm.
Um, this would have been right after the court case that we talked about earlier.
Correct. Correct. Yeah,
So
the
I mean, is it?
1826 court case. Yep.
And that was the same time that his dad also said, "Hey, let's not do this treasure digging anymore, but let's transit. Let's use these powers for religious good, not for our own gain."
Exactly.
So him telling
Yeah.
Isaac would fall in line with this a consistent story of, "Hey, I'm moving on. I'm not doing treasure digging anymore."
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, the 1826 court case uh, happened well after the the sort of treasure hunt for Josiah Stoll. So yeah, it would have been in line. Joseph would have been in line with when he told Isaac that he was done with treasure seeking. You're absolutely right. That would have agreed with what Joseph Senior had said about Joseph in that court case.
John, I've got to ask you a question. Are you impressed with how much I know? Being the second time we've gone over this.
You just totally gave it all away. You don't have to tell people that we messed up and that this is a recording.
Oh,
This is
I
this
did.
is a
I
high,
didn't say it. You did.
this is this
I
is a high end podcast,
I
and
didn't
you
say we
totally
messed
just let
up.
the.
And thank you for saying we instead of Tyler messed up, because neither of us pushed the record button, even though my screen's the only one that has the option of doing it. It's both of
Yeah,
our
no,
faults together.
I definitely blame myself. So
For not allowing me to,
yeah, for
well,
not
not
for
having
trusting you,
for
essentially. I
trusting
blame
me.
myself.
There we
Yeah.
go. I have let many people down in my days for trusting me. So I'm glad you're not alone. We'll have a
Yeah.
support group out there.
Yeah, so no, I am impressed. Good job for remembering what we talked about 2 days ago. But anyway, yeah, so we're moving into 1827. Joseph and Emma get married. Isaac Hale sells them some property, and they're just sort of, getting their life started. And then, according to Joseph Knight Sr., one day Joseph comes home to his parents' house and claims that he had been chastised by Moroni for not being more focused on the work, and that it was time for him to start seriously considering taking the plates. So let's jump to September of 1827. This is where the Joseph Knight source becomes very interesting, because Knight knew that the time was getting close for Joseph to get the plates. So he sets up his business schedule to be in Palmyra in late September so he can be there when Joseph actually gets the plates. And he talks about Joseph as he's getting ready on September 21st. Joseph is scheduled to get the plates the next day, and he was worried about a guy named Samuel Lawrence, who was also a treasure seeker. Now, Lawrence was a guy who had, dug around what is now the Hill Cumorah. He'd looked for treasure there, and and there's some evidence that, or it's easy to suspect that at some point Joseph and Lawrence had maybe worked together, or at least talked together about these kinds of things. And that's why Lawrence was very interested in the plates, and Joseph was worried that Lawrence would be trouble. So
What,
he's. Oh,
was
go
he
ahead.
the one who told the story of seeing the spectacles, or is that
Lawrence?
somebody else? Yeah.
No, Lawrence never saw them. You
Okay.
may be thinking of Joseph Knight, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
But let's see. Let me actually pull that up. Okay, so the night of September 21st, uh, Joseph actually sends his dad out to do some spying. Some check out the Lawrence household, see what they were up to, see if they were planning anything. Joseph Senior comes back, and doesn't find anything. He says coast is clear. Um, and the funny thing is that when Joseph Jr. sends his father out, he tells him, if you see Lawrence and he's up to something, tell him that if I find him there, I will thrash the stumps with him. So there's some fun little 19th century trash talk for you.
You would thrash the stumps? Is
He
that
would
what you said?
thrash the stumps with him. Yeah, Joseph would thrash the stumps with Lawrence. Like smack him against these old trees or
Wow.
something. Like a
So
rug.
you mentioned September 21st, and I think we talked about that a little earlier, being the fall solstice. Is that the term? Autumn
Correct. Yep.
solstice. Um,
Yep.
would in the treasure digging world, you mentioned that's an important time. Would it be possible that Lawrence would be doing his own thing that night, or
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
if this thing only comes around once a year, I would imagine all treasure diggers would be up to something that night if it was such an important date.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm more inclined to say that he would have been up to something that related to what Joseph was doing.
Okay.
Because he knew Joseph. Apparently, he knew that Joseph was uh, about to get the plates, and like you said, September 21st, 22nd is the fall equinox. So it would have made sense to Lawrence that Joseph would be going for the plates that night or that day sometime.
Okay. Equinox. Thank you for correcting me without correcting me.
Why? What
Solstice
did?
is.
Oh, you
I
said
said, I said
solstice.
it's an
Me-
equinox. You're correct.
I am.
Oh,
Oh,
I don't
good.
know. I think solstice is the peak, and equinox is when it is the middle. I don't know.
Yep, autumn equinox. Yes, I am. I am correct. Sorry, I didn't
Anyway,
notice that you said something else. Anyway, yeah. So again, this is all according to Joseph Knight Senior. Um, let's see, where was I? So they all go to bed that night, September 21st. And what Joseph Knight didn't know was that Joseph Smith had planned to go out right at midnight. Uh,
Junior.
Joseph Smith Jr. had planned to go out right at midnight to get the plates. And according to Lucy Mack, Joseph Smith's mother, uh, he and Emma took Joseph Knight Sr.'s cart and his horse and carriage out to get the plates. Um, so they go get the plates, and they don't come back um, at all that night. The next morning, Knight wakes up and notices that his horse and carriage were gone, and he freaks out a little bit. He's like, "Oh, what happened to my horse and carriage?" And Lucy calms him down, and eventually Joseph comes rolling in. Joseph and Emma come rolling in with the cart and the horse, and everything's fine. And you can kind of tell that everyone's anxious to hear about what happened. And this is according to Joseph Knight Sr. He says, after breakfast, Joseph called me into the other room, and he set his foot on the bed and leaned his head on his hand and says, well, I'm disappointed. Well, say I, this is Joseph Knight Sr., I'm sorry. And then Joseph Smith said, well, I'm greatly disappointed. It is 10 times better than I expected. Then he went on to tell the length and width and thickness of the plates, and he said they appeared to be gold, but he seemed to think more of the glasses or the Urim and Thummim than he did of the plates. For he said, I can see anything. They are marvelous. So that might be what you were thinking of when somebody saw the
Well,
spectacles.
I heard a story that Joseph went up there with another treasure digger, and the other person said that they could see inside the casing, and that he saw the plates and some spectacles. But I don't
Hmm.
know anything about that, other than I'd heard it. But
Yeah, I haven't heard that story. That would have been. I mean, it could have been. There's a lot of people around the Palmyra area who would relate stories later on that said, "Oh yeah, Joseph showed me this."
suffice it right now to say that it was not part of Joseph Knight Sr.'s story.
Correct. Yeah, there is a. Um, see, his mother, Joseph's mother, was able to sort of hold the spectacles as they were covered in a hanky, and she said that they were two smooth, three-cornered diamonds set in glass. They were fixed in bows that were connected, as she said, like old-fashioned spectacles. So that's one of the better descriptions we have of the Urim and Thummim, as they were called.
Cool.
Um, yeah. So he didn't bring the plates in that day though. So he came home after getting them, but he didn't have them with him. Um,
Hey, John,
yeah.
since it came up, I'm a little confused about this. Is the Urim and Thummim, are those seer stones in a maybe a spectacle frame like thing, or are they actual spectacles, or do we know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the reason why it's a good question is because the Urim and Thummim and the seer stone were used. The terms were used interchangeably to describe both, especially seer stone or especially Urim and Thummim used to describe the seer stone. So, for example, well, I'll just skip ahead a little bit. Um, let's
If we're
see.
gonna get there, we can get there later. I was just
Okay.
curious.
Yeah, we are going to get there later, but yeah, to to your point, the Urim and Thummim was considered sort of a type of seer stone, and but it wasn't the seer stone that Joseph carried around with him, which was a dark sort of round stone, and I think we've showed a picture of it before.
Right, because he
But
got that dark one much earlier, and this one he got when he got the
exactly.
plates.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
And this definitely
So,
has some sort of eyeglass spectacle frame to
mhm.
it. That's something that has been documented pretty well, right?
Yeah. So, as far as I know, the only people who actually saw the Urim and Thummim were Joseph, of course, and then the three witnesses: Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Martin Harris.
Okay.
But but yeah, we'll get into that later on. So, as I said, he didn't bring the plates home. He kept them hidden. He left them in a hiding place, supposedly a log that was kind of rotted out near his home. He hid him
Remind
there
me,
and kind of covered him up.
what year we are now?
Yeah, we're still in 1827.
1827. Okay.
Yeah. So Joseph left them in that hiding space until he could actually have a cabinet made to hold them, something with a lock. He actually asked his mother if she had one, and she said no. And so he said, no, it's fine. We'll just have one made. So the plates lay hidden for a few days, and then Joseph Senior actually he's doing his uh, spy work, and he finds out that there were some ruffians who were planning on finding the plates and taking them, and they had actually called a conjurer, as Joseph Smith Senior called it, to help them find the plates where Joseph had hidden them. The conjurer obviously would have been like a treasure seeker who had some sort of mystical way of finding treasure. And this apparently there was enough to the story that it alarmed Joseph Smith, and he decided it was time to put them in a more secure location.
Sorry, I'm comically imagining Joseph Smith Sr. going down to the general store, trying to get the down low on who's out to. So, any plans to go steal my son's plates you're all hearing about anywhere? Like, what's
Oh
word
my
on the
gosh,
street, folks?
you're actually not far off. Let me
Okay.
pull it up. Actually, well, I'll just read it to you because it's pretty good. So, um, this is from Lucy Smith. She said that Joseph Sr. soon learned that 10 or 12 men were clubbed together, with one Willard Chase, a Methodist class leader, at their head. So, if you remember, Willard Chase was the one that was with Joseph when he found his seer stone. Um, and then the record goes on. And what was still more ridiculous, they had sent 60 or 70 miles for a certain conjurer to come and divine the place where the plates were secreted. We supposed that Joseph had taken the plates and hid them somewhere, and we were apprehensive that our enemies might discover their place of deposit. Accordingly, the next morning, after hearing of their plans, my husband concluded to go among the neighbors to see what he could learn with regard to the plans of the adverse party. The first house he came to, he found the conjurer and Willard Chase together with the rest of the clan. Making an errand, he went in and sat down near the door, leaving it a little ajar in order to overhear their conversation. They stood in the yard near the door and were devising plans to find Joe Smith's gold Bible, as they expressed themselves. The conjurer seemed much animated, although he had traveled 60 miles the day and night previous. Presently, the woman of the house, becoming uneasy at the exposures they were making, stepped through a back door into the yard and called to her husband in a suppressed tone, but loud enough to be heard distinctly by Mr. Smith. Sam, Sam, you are cutting your own throat. At this, the conjurer bawled out at the top of his voice, I am not afraid of anybody. We will have them plates in spite of Joe Smith or all the devils in hell. When the woman came in again, Mr. Smith laid aside a newspaper which he had been holding in his hand and remarked, I believe I have not time to finish reading the paper now. And he left the house and returned home. So that image that you were
That's
having
pretty
is
good.
actually not far off. Yeah.
So this you said was written by Lucy Mack Smith.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was 40 like 1840s when she said wrote down most of her things. So I
Correct. Yeah.
think as far as telling a biased story that's outdated, it kind of meets those criteria. But at the same time, there's nothing there that I think is worth lying about, in my opinion. So I don't know.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. There are some biases that we need to be careful of, but at the same time, um, it's the best record we have of what Joseph Senior may have experienced. So,
Right.
kind of a humorous but well, slightly humorous account of it all. I think others may disagree, which is fine. But yeah, it's kind of funny to picture Joseph Senior like holding a paper up, pretending to read it, but actually
Outside
listening
his
to.
neighbor's house. Just like,
Yeah.
this is where I usually read the paper.
Yeah, nothing unusual about this. Oh, I better be going. But
Don't have time to finish reading now.
yeah. So
No,
anyway,
no, knowing that they're there to take something from his son, like, and everybody knows that. Like, it's not like
yeah.
he's just this random nobody. It's the guy's dad. So that
Yeah.
is pretty. There's a little bit of comedy in there.
Yeah.
I
So
agree with you.
so yeah, it's kind of a fun story. But so Joseph, he hears about this, and it's alarming enough for him to I think he was working. Shoot, at the time he was working kind of far away. Oh, I think he was digging a well for someone, and uh, and Joseph Senior sent him the message, and Joseph was alarmed enough to ask someone if he could borrow their horse and ride home as quick as he could. So he got home. He goes and gets the plates that night, and he, according to the record, he kind of stayed off the roads so as not to attract attention. But it didn't work. He was ambushed 3 times on the way home. While he and Apparently he got home. He was very sweaty and tired, and he had dislocated his thumb while trying to sort of fend off these guys who were trying to get the plates away from him. Um,
Do, do,
so
you, is there an account written of that story? I've heard the story before, and I find it interesting. Uh,
mhm.
do we have anything on that we could share?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Let me see. Give me a second here.
Again, trying to put a 200-year removed perspective on this. I found this story to be interesting, to say
Yeah,
the least.
yeah. Let me see if I can find a source for you. This should only take a second,
No
but
worries.
this is high quality
So
podcasting.
right, but so what you were saying though is he got home, he was winded, he had jammed his thumb or really hurt his thumb
Mhm.
pretty badly, and then he told everybody what happened when he got
Yeah,
home.
yeah. So let's see. Okay, I've almost got the source for this. If it'll
Are you looking up night still, or is this a different source?
No, this is different. This is from, I believe, Lucy Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucy Smith. Yeah, so the night story does not talk about him bringing the plates actually into the house.
So likewise,
Um,
this is after Joseph Smith has been killed by his
mhm,
mother, who believed in his role as prophet. Um, about 25 years after it actually happened. No,
cor-
25 or 15. 15 years after it happened.
um, yeah, about 15, probably.
Yeah, so in that
Yeah.
ballpark. All right, cool.
Uh-huh.
Have I stalled
Yeah.
well enough?
Yeah, that was good. Good job. Um, so so he brings him home. He's winded, and apparently, according to the story, actually, let's see. Hold on. Oh well, we'll look at it later. Um, so apparently, these ruffians, hooligans, had sort of followed him home, and apparently they were trying to hide the plates, and Joseph just sort of instinctively ran out the door screaming, and everyone kind of followed him, and they made this big brouhaha, and it kind of frightened the ruffians off. And these guys would have included Willard Chase, Samuel Lawrence, and their conjurer. Um, so that's the story of how the plates. He actually puts them in the cabinet that he had built, and they lock it and they hide the cabinet in um, in the fireplace, sort of the hearth of their fireplace.
Okay, so he doesn't. That source doesn't talk about how he got hurt.
No,
And
no, Joseph Knight
okay,
doesn't. No.
all right, yeah.
So
How much? Well, go ahead. We might get into this later, maybe not. But
go. You can ask if you want.
so as I'm envisioning this, and in my mind, I still see people chasing him.
Mhm.
The my understanding of the situation is he was chased for some distance, and he
Correct.
was carrying these gold plates. Do we know how the size of the plates, how much they might have weighed, what what was he carrying them in? Maybe I don't know anything along those lines. As the
Yeah.
feasibility of being chased by gold plates. If I'm being chased by somebody, obviously I wouldn't drop gold. Well, I don't think I drop gold plates, but if I had anything else of any weight, I would just drop it because I imagine it slowed me down significantly. What do we know about the gold plates and that he was carrying as he's being chased by these three people?
Yeah, so there's different reports of that. Willard Chase, the guy who actually was probably involved in this brouhaha, said that Joseph told him that the plates were between 40 and 60 pounds. So, they're not light. And then Martin Harris said that the plates weighed between 40 and 50 pounds.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I want to say that Joseph went, was it 3 miles between the hiding place and his house? Um, so so yeah, it would have been a very strenuous activity, carrying a 40 to 50 to 60 pound object. Uh, that does bring up a good question, which we can get into later on, or which I plan to get into later on this, which is what the plates were exactly. There's a lot of debate around that among Mormon historians. Our faithful listeners will probably know what I'm going to say about it, so I'm not going to give any spoilers. But yeah, if Joseph was carrying a 40 to 50 pound item to 60 pound item, uh, it's understandable that he would have been pretty winded when he got home, and maybe even slightly injured.
Yeah. And I mean, granted, he was uh, in great shape. So I've heard he's super very strong farmer working guy. So if I were to do that, I wouldn't make it 3 miles with 50 pounds of anything. So it's hard for
Yeah,
me
he.
to put too much context, uh, too much of understanding of, because I imagine that 50 pounds for a strong person is much different than 50 pounds for a weak person.
No, you're right, but it brings up a good idea, which is we could do something like Mormon CrossFit, like Mormon history CrossFit, where you have to like run through these woods while carrying a 50-pound book that's made out of metal, and then you have people
Chasing you.
swarming you and chasing you. You you know what I'm talking about, right? Like these Spartan and
Oh yeah,
CrossFit
I know. I
races
know.
where
Yeah.
we're just
I
asked to do these ridiculous tasks, and what's more, you have to pay to do it. So, I mean, that's something. We could do a Mormon CrossFit activity. See if you
that
can run as fast as Joseph Smith.
I will leave that up to you. That one's on your plate.
Thanks. Well, if any of our listeners are interested, just let us know.
Just
Uh,
let John know.
yeah, one of the other activities can be to like find the seer stone in the well. Dig a well,
Dig
and
a
if you
hole.
find, yeah, maybe I'm taking it too far. But anyway, um, so yeah, he gets the plates back, and there's some pretty interesting stories about how he kept them hidden from these ruffians. As I mentioned, there was one Willard Chase, uh, and apparently Chase felt pretty entitled to have a share in these plates. He told I think it was in a court case. He said that Joseph told him that he would share the plates with him. And what's more, as I mentioned, Willard was with Joseph when Joseph found his seer stone. And here's a quote from Willard. In the year 1822, I was engaged in digging a well. I employed Alvin and Joseph Smith to assist me. After digging about 20 feet below the surface of the earth, we discovered a singularly appearing stone which excited my curiosity. I brought it to the top of the well, and as we were examining it, Joseph put it into his hat and then his face into the top of his hat. The next morning, he came to me and wished to obtain the stone, alleging that he could see in it. But I told him I did not wish to part with it on account of its being a curiosity, but I would lend it. So that's according to Willard Chase, who is obviously not very supportive of Joseph Smith. So there's some probable biases there. The other half of the story, or the other side of the story, is that Joseph just found it and kept it. So, and that brings up a good point too, which is why so many people were interested in the plates. Joseph had searched for treasure. He had been out on treasure digs with these guys, and you can imagine them sitting around some of the more common places of Palmyra, sharing stories and talking about the folklore, or the stories that they had heard. Um, and so that's why you can imagine why there'd be some interest in it. And then so Joseph has these plates hidden, and these guys are trying to get their share of it, right? Or at least uh, settle their curiosity, or satisfy their curiosity. And there was such a fervor around it that Samuel Lawrence, gets a guy named Alva Beeman. This could have been the conjurer. We're not really sure, but this guy Alva Beeman was able to use rods, which we've talked about before, these divining rods, and he brings Beeman to Joseph's house to try and the three of them are trying to convince Joseph to let them see the plates. And while they're talking, Joseph keeps telling them, no, no, I can't let you see him. At some point during the conversation, and this story comes from Joseph Knight Sr., Beeman holds up his rods, and they point to the hearth where the plates are hidden. And that's at that
What's a
point
hearth?
a fireplace.
Okay. I've actually I was there a couple of years ago and saw the hearth. I don't believe that's the word they used to describe it.
Oh, you were at the Palmyra hearth,
Yes, just the hearth,
the
not
house.
nothing else in the vicinity. Just the fireplace was all
Yeah.
we went there to see. We saw a few
Wow.
other things on the side, but the hearth
Uh-huh.
was our main purpose for the visit.
Well, that must have been an exciting visit. Joseph Smith's hearth. Anyway, yeah. So the rods, which would have just been two sticks, maybe they were shaved to look, nicer. Um, but these rods actually point to the hearth, and Beeman says that's where the plates are, and so Joseph makes them leave. Another story says that after that incident, Joseph hides the plates in sort of a little cooper shop that they had on the property. And a cooper, I believe, is somebody who makes barrels. So the Smith family had this cooper shop on their property, and Joseph hides the plates uh, in this shop. He actually takes the cabinet that the plates were in and puts them under the floorboards of the shop, and then puts the plates themselves in like a stack of hay up in the loft. And who was it? Yeah, Willard Chase brings his sister to the Smith house. They found out, or maybe they were just scouting around, snooping around to see where the plates were. But Willard brings his sister Sally, who was also something of uh, div- uh, treasure seeker. She had a glass. Um, Supposedly, it was this green glass where she could locate things through. They come to the Smith residence, and they're actually seen snooping around the Cooper's shop. And and later, the Smith family finds that the floorboards had been pulled up, the cabinet had been found and smashed, but the plates remained hidden in the loft. So there's just kind of these really interesting stories of uh, magical elements, mixing in with each other, and you can see how and why people of this era would have been sort of more inclined to believe in these types of things and embrace them and actually try to do them. In our last episode, we talked about how treasure seeking involved three different elements, right? The first was religion, uh, also a sense of nationalism, and also just the folklore. And that's not including just the desire to get rich quick, you know. And so this is, I think these stories, yeah, they're great for church history, but they're also fascinating, a fascinating glimpse into American history in general, and how the culture kind of worked, or how this magical worldview worked itself into the culture of the time.
Yeah.
So
You
yeah,
mentioned
pretty
several
interesting.
names of people who were trying to get the plates from Joseph. How, when you say those guys, how many people would you put in that category? Like 5, 10, 20, 50? And
Yeah,
maybe
that's
also what percent of the population might that be? Is it just a small portion of the population? Just specifically trying to get the plates, not believer, not magic
mhm.
people or not, but just the ones who are kind of attacking Joseph Smith for the plates.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there's three camps, right? The first camp would have been Joseph's family, his immediate supporters, who believe everything he says and say, "Look, he told us we can't see the plates. We're not going to try to see them. We're going to try to help him keep them safe." Right. So that's the first
Did
camp.
he, and for that camp, did he
Yeah.
threaten that either he or they would die if they saw the plates or be destroyed?
Certainly possible.
Okay.
I don't have a
I,
specific reference to that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I don't have a specific recollection of hearing it, but for some reason
Mm.
it was enough that I wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, there probably could be, and I could look and see if I can find something.
Okay.
Um,
I'm stumping you a couple times on this. So listeners, if you have the answers, please let us know and we will share them with everybody. Um,
yeah, if you have the answers, just keep it to yourself. We're not really. I mean, this is our podcast. No,
John
I'm just
is
kidding.
the source of information for this podcast. Just
Yeah.
John and nobody else.
No, absolutely. We love to get questions. So yeah, if you have a potential
Answers,
source,
John. Answers.
answers, we love to get questions and answers. Yeah, let us know, and that'd be great. But yeah, so I don't have specific numbers to answer your question with, but again, there's a couple different camps. The first one is the immediate supporters. The second camp, I would say, is more of the people who are curious about it. They've heard the stories, and so they're interested in learning more. They're interested in maybe getting a glimpse of the plates, um, and of course they're turned away, and that's that. And then there's the third camp who we're talking about, with Willard Chase, um, Beeman, Samuel Lawrence, and their sort of gang. And I couldn't tell you how big that group was. I mean, we could go back to that source, that story of Joseph Sr. listening in on the group. And I think, let's see, 12 men, he said he listened in
Okay.
on.
There
10
we
or
go.
12 men. Yeah.
I must have missed that when you said it the first time. So that answers the question.
Yeah. So yeah, that gives you some idea. But
Cool. Well, thank you.
yeah.
This has been interesting.
Mm.
Do you want to
Thank
give us?
you.
Do you want to give us a little teaser for what's coming up next?
Yeah. So the next one, we're going to get into your question about the Urim and Thummim and the seer stone and how they worked, and because there's a lot of confusion around that, right? What was the Urim and Thummim? Who saw it? What was it? But then also Joseph had the seer stone that he used. What was the interaction there? So we're going to get into that, and also a little bit of the translation process.
Awesome. Sounds cool. Well, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Appreciate
Mhm.
it. And we will see y'all next time. Life's rough. Roll on.
So long.
Yeah, I sure hope I remember to hit record next time.
Me too. Be sure to like us on Instagram, or follow us on Instagram, and tell your friends. You can find With the Stone Rolling wherever you can buy your wherever fine podcasts are sold.